This is Stokes County, North Carolina, where I've lived for the past 18 years now. A few years ago, I made a documentary about a controversy surrounding a Christian flag on a veterans memorial in the town's public park. It was a pretty eye-opening experience for me.
Again, you can look around the world. You don't see a lot of Muslim nations pretending they're not Muslim. How many believe it's time for America to quit pretending we're not Christian? And if there's people in King, North Carolina who don't like that, there's lots of places you can move to. And if you know who they are, encourage them to move.
While making the film, it was interesting how everyone assumed I was a Christian without ever asking me. A few people even claimed that they could tell if someone was an atheist since, quote, the devil was in their eyes. After a year of filming interviews, someone finally asked me my religious views, and I told them I was an atheist. Word spread quickly, and soon the threats began pouring in.
Being a Christian and meeting your first atheist, it was kind of eye-opening.
You probably already know several atheists, but just don't realize it. They are your relatives, your teachers, men and women fighting for your freedom of religion in the military, and even some of the people sitting next to you in church, and possibly even standing at the pulpit. The goal of this film is to give those of you who do believe in God a look at the thinking of this small but rapidly growing minority of the population who do not believe in the supernatural.
These people who have initiated this complaint that the Christian flag be taken down, they have remained anonymous. I agree that they are cowards and that they should come forth and let we who believe in it see who they are.
And so in the spring of 2012, I traveled to Washington, D.C. for one of the most extraordinary gatherings in the history of the free thought movement.
Welcome to the Reason Rally. Welcome to Rick Santorum's worst goddamn nightmare.
Hello! Hello!
I just had a suspicion that this might be the beginning of something historically very significant.
The Reason Rally, I think, was very important to allow people to come together and recognize that they're not alone, which is a thing I notice very much when I'm giving talks, especially in the so-called Bible Belt, and I get very large audiences, very enthusiastic audiences, and they cheer and give a standing ovation very often, but I suspect the standing ovation is not so much for me as for each other, because they suddenly recognize that they're not alone. And the Reason Rally was that raised to a higher level.
What a magnificent, inspiring sight. I was expecting great things even in fine weather. In the rain, look at this. This is the most incredible sight I can remember ever seeing.
Up until a month or two ago, I didn't even know there were other atheists running around. My wife called me up and said they put a billboard up outside of Springfield, Missouri. I got online, found out that there were societies everywhere, and joined immediately. And they told me about the rally, and that's how I got to be here. I just wanted to be part of this.
Bad religion!
Just looking out at the audience and seeing the people, again, from so many walks of life who feel liberated. You know, they feel like they've been given a chance to not have to hide who they are. It's very reminiscent of what attracted me early on, 30 years ago, to the punk scene. It was a community where people said, you know, I can be who I want, and I don't care who's against it. I've got people here I can share my true self with.
Everything that we have that makes our lives possible exists because human beings have tested the things they found in their surroundings, made predictions based on those tests, and then improved upon them. This is reason, the human capacity to make sense of the world.
there's become this heritage of demonization of non-believers of all stripes. And so people are taught from a young age, atheists are evil, atheists are immoral, there can't be any good without God.
Irreligion and atheism is taking over. And we see that in pornography, in drug abuse, in broken marriages. We see so many symptoms of godlessness in this world.
A recent study by psychologists in the United States and Canada said that atheists are the least trusted group in the nation, just on par with rapists.
I was saying to her, atheists and agnostics are so gentle and respectable, and where do they get these bizarre ideas? And she said to me, many Americans have never knowingly met an atheist.
I'm a fourth-generation atheist on both sides of my family.
I haven't formally said, Mom, Dad, I'm an atheist, but they're pretty aware. I told them I was coming down to an atheist convention, and my mom said to me, well, be safe and God be with you. I said, Mom, I don't think God was invited to this convention.
I don't believe in God. I have two proofs for not believing in God. First of all, God, if you're there, we're here in Washington, come down now. If you're there, this is a pretty good time. I'm sure folks in Izzard love it. Just come down, say hello. I have been around the world talking my strangely crafted bollocks that I talk, and he never comes down.
We have to band together and simply say, some of us in this country believe there is no God, because there is no God.
I play a scientist on TV. I am in awe of those that do it for real.
When you actually stop and think about what's going on in the real world, perhaps the most magical thing of all is that we have evolved to the point where we can appreciate it and understand it, and that is magic, but in a really good sense, not in the sense of magic spells or Jesus walking on water and that kind of thing.
Our show is about critical thinking primarily. Critical thinking, curiosity, and play.
What do you think of gluon fusion? That's what I really want to know. I was really going to ask you, what do you think of gluon fusion as a way of producing quarks in the Large Hadron Collider?
Well,
I was going to say...
I love it. Question. I think it's a great idea.
They say apparently we also have our sacred books, like the God Delusion and so on. And then we have our prophets, like Charles Darwin, and we have our evangelists, the people who are spreading the good word around. And then there are people who give their money away to further the cause. We have these gatherings, all this stuff that indeed you do find with religion. But you see, if atheism is a religion because of these things, then so is the Democratic Party. And so is feminism, and so is the NFL. And so is, everything else that involves people getting together.
We atheists are not committed a priori to some truth that there is no God. That's not a doctrine, that's not a dogma. We are committed to reason. And I will admit that I would go back to believing in God if there's good reason for it.
Now, why did you come out to support this?
Because we need more reason. There's too many people trying to deny actual facts about the world in order to promote their beliefs, which this equation doesn't work to anybody's benefit. I don't care what anybody believes about an original tipper of dominoes, but when it comes to denying things that are in front of us, you're actually dragging us backwards. And I feel I'm taking seriously my role in pushing people forwards, and that's why I'm here supporting this.
If somebody's going to be making decisions about science policy, I want to know if they think the Earth was created 6,000 years ago.
It couldn't be much more than 5,000-6,000 years old, and so things in science do not challenge me and my faith. I believe everything the Bible says. If God said He put all those animals in the ark in a cracker box, I would believe it.
They state that they will automatically and thoughtlessly reject any and all evidence that stands against their predetermined conclusions.
But it reminded me of a quote I read yesterday by somebody called Gregory House, who I later discovered was actually a fictional character, but never mind, it was a good quote. He's something like, if you could reason with religious people, there wouldn't be any religious people.
It's a pity you missed us, because we were just talking about gluon fusion. And I got enlightened. It's a shame that wasn't on camera, because now I have a new idea, and I'm going to write a paper, and I'm not even going to give him credit for it. So
here are some other things that, like the components of the airplane, have been tested and proven. I'm going to call them facts. E equals MC fucking squared. Force equals mass times acceleration. The Earth is not the center of the universe.
Richard Feynman, who I wrote a book about, said, just because you understand how a rainbow works doesn't make it less fascinating, it makes it more fascinating, and I agree with him, and I think you're absolutely right. The real story, I don't know why people seem to find the myths and simple things more fascinating. Maybe because they want something to be inexplicable, and maybe we're hardwired for it.
Myths ultimately are just made up, and any fool can make up a story. And so they don't have to submit to the discipline of being tested. They don't have to submit to the discipline of having any evidence in their favor. All they have to be is a good story, and they're fiction.
The problem with religious myths is they fall into the category of what we call oogie boogie, or what James Randi would call woo-woo. You're mostly in the zone of trying to prove negatives, which is impossible scientifically because you have nothing to compare against.
Have we done it yet? Have we found the God particle?
No. Well, we may.
Oh, I got a question for you.
Okay, good. See, now we're rolling.
They talk about the beginning of... This is my theory for the universe.
Uh-oh. People tell me the theories of the universe all the time.
The Earth is over 4 billion years old. Evolution is literally a fact of life. As Neil deGrasse Tyson says, facts are true whether or not you believe them. Wow, boy, is this a special day. This is probably the only day in history where you could get a Bruce Springsteen-sized cheer just for saying the Earth is over 4 billion years old.
My theory is that it must be eternal. Eternity must go on, because I can't think of day one and then before day one, they just had some gerbils playing banjos. It doesn't make any sense. There's nothing. So my idea is that if there was a big bang, there's going to be a big crunch and a big bang. It's like bellows, and it's in 3 or 5D or whatever it is.
It's a much prettier idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but let me tell you one important thing.
What?
Universe doesn't care what you like.
There's no one path to atheism, of course. For me, it was my love of reading history in high school that led to a rejection of my Catholic faith.
Reading the Bible from literally Old Testament and New cover to cover, and when I turned the last page, I said out loud, literally, yep, I'm an atheist.
I was very religious, yes. How it happened, basically I read the Bible.
That's not a good idea.
Yeah, not a good idea for a religious person. You're gonna turn an atheist.
You've probably heard Julia Sweeney's one-woman monologue, where after she escaped from Catholicism, her mother discovered that she'd become an atheist, and her mother phoned up and said, "Well, I don't mind you not believing in God, but an atheist?" So the word itself does seem to, obviously people don't actually know what it means.
I was an agnostic. Maybe some of you are, maybe you know people who are agnostic, who, you're not quite sure what you want to believe. Or I think if you are an agnostic, you're probably agnostic in case there is an end of time. And then you can be in the agnostic queue, in the agnostic line. And you can say, because God will be there, and you go, hi. No, I was never an atheist. No, I was agnostic, yeah. I was never quite sure. And now I'm sure. Mainly because you bloody turned up.
Agnostics are like people who vote independent. Pick a side and start losing friends like the rest of us.
We don't care what you call yourself, we all disbelieve in the same God.
Well, for me, it was actually coming to a point of realizing that the New Testament Gospels were not quite the inherent, holy inspired words that I thought they were.
We even know the stories themselves were elaborated. The stories themselves in the New Testament started out simple, but as time passed, a later gospel writer would make it a little more amazing, and then 15 years later, Matthew and Luke come along and make it even more amazing. And then when you get to John, 60 years later, whoa, this is incredible. So you can actually see a legendary growth in history as the story is being told.
So here's what Justin Martyr said. Justin Martyr is an early church father from the 2nd century. Analogies to the history of Christ. And when we say also that the Word, who is the first birth of God, was produced without sexual union, and that He, Jesus Christ, our teacher, was crucified and died, and rose again, and ascended into heaven, we propound nothing different from what you believe regarding those whom you esteem sons of Jupiter. As to Christ's being born of a virgin, Justin says, you have your Perseus to balance that. So now we know that Perseus was claimed to have been born of a virgin.
Dionysus was a god-man who died, who had an empty tomb, who turned water into wine.
Turning water into wine was a miracle routinely performed in temples to Bacchus at the time. So there's commonly known that this was a common miracle. Every year they'd put these pots in a temple, seal the temple, and the next day they'd be filled with wine.
Unlike religious people who are perfectly prepared to go to the one extreme and say, I'm absolutely certain there's a God, no reasonable scientist could actually prove or claim to prove that there is no God. All you can do is say there's absolutely not a shred of evidence that there's a God, and therefore we are agnostic about not just the Jewish God, but all the gods, about Thor and Wotan and Jupiter and Zeus and Mithras, and leprechauns and goblins and hobgoblins and every thing that any tribe anywhere on earth has imagined, and plus millions of other things that you could imagine. Yes, you have to be agnostic about just about everything, but the onus is on those who want to believe in a hobgoblin or a leprechaun or in Yahweh or Jesus. And when you thrust the onus on them, they've absolutely no evidence whatsoever.
I actually can prove, if you're talking about the Christian God, it's pretty easy to disprove. The omniscient, all-powerful, all those things together, this is pretty easy stuff to disprove. As for some kind of deistic, abstract God, no, probably I cannot prove it, but I don't have to.
I was waiting for somebody to prove me wrong, which is the exact opposite thing to do. And as soon as I realized that, it took me 8 years to realize that, but as soon as I did, that was what let me get out of my faith.
There's a yearning for that time when mommy and daddy would tell you what to do, when everything was simple, and then you could just get your orders from mommy and daddy.
Child comes over, is distressed, pick me up, all right? Look at Pentecostal worshipers. What do? They reach up to a caretaker. That's the attachment system. So you see the attachment system right there.
I did really want to believe, though, especially like when I was in middle school and I just needed something, I guess, to make me feel better. But I mean, I prayed every night, please help me believe in you, and nothing happened. So I have to assume either God is a jerk and doesn't care about me, this is the wrong God, or there is no God. And the one that made the most sense to me was that there is no God.
Because I think there is a feeling for a lot of people as they stop believing that there's something particularly wrong with them, that there's a fault in them because they can't believe, and they fight that. So acknowledging that I was an atheist was a big relief.
Also, if God does turn up, we do assume that he would have a deep voice. That is one thing. You do assume he would, hi, I am here and I am God. But he could turn up and go, hello, I'm God.
I wonder about the politicians, particularly the Republican convention right now. I mean, how much of that do they really believe, or is it just something they've got to mouth in order to get the votes?
The Secular Coalition for America did a search for the highest-ranking non-religious officials.
Woody Kaplan, who is the chairman of the advisory board and has been in politics and nonprofits for a very long time, he went around to the people he knows, and he knows almost everyone in Congress, and they know him on a first-name basis. 26 of them admitted that they were non-theists. He tried to convince them all to come out, and only one did. And it's amazing even one did, but that was what resulted in ultimately Representative Pete Stark coming out.
The others all asked us to keep it secret, not to tell anyone because they are afraid. But when it comes to coming out, it is an opportunity to make a difference. Anybody who's willing to do it, willing to risk something, risk losing job, losing relationships, there is a risk, but it's an opportunity to make a difference, and we admire somebody who's willing to do that.
I've told 2 people. One is my sister, and she's been really good about keeping the secret. And the first thing that she said to me after about 2 minutes of silence after I told her was, "Don't tell mom and dad what you just told me."
My mom, it was a long conversation. It wasn't one time or 2 times. It was over a few years where I'd been questioning out loud to her, and eventually I just had to say, I really don't buy any of this stuff, and I'm going to try to fight against it. And she said, you know, I really don't buy it either, but I don't want your life to be more difficult. I really wish you wouldn't be outspoken about it. Can't you keep those ideas to yourself? And I had a flashback to a few years prior when I had said that I was bisexual, and she said the same exact thing.
A woman walks up to him and says, "Oh my God, I recognize you from the Pride Parade." And he goes, "Are you saying that you're a lesbian and an atheist?" And he just starts going and going and going.
One of the people who signed up actually was religious himself, but he wanted to come with us. He didn't realize we were giving out stickers. And so he was being identified as an atheist, and for the first time realized how we were treated and how we were seen. He noticed people treating him differently because they thought he was an atheist. He wrote about it later and said that he was a little bit ashamed of how his fellow theists were treating us.
Well, they think I'm a terrorist. Yeah, and I'm not kidding. They think I'm a terrorist.
They're really upset about it.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm okay with that.
Good to see you, young man.
Really good to see you.
Yeah, so good, so good. Yes, you got your reaction out there.
It's a fantastic crowd. It's a wonderful crowd. I got teary. I've never had that happen to me on stage.
Well, I have it all the time. You'll get used to it.
Stephen Hawking is an argument he and I agree on, but you won't like it. It is, so the question is, what happened before the Big Bang? The answer is, it's not a good question. Because time and space are tied to the nature of matter by gravity, in general relativity. So in fact, when the entire universe was in a microscopically small region, if space suddenly was created, it's quite likely that time was suddenly created. There was no time before the Big Bang. There literally was no time. Time arose out of the Big Bang. So if that's the case, it's not a good question. Now I know you don't like it. You're looking at me like you don't like it.
No, so you're saying that there was a point where everything was very quiet.
Everything was very quiet. The gerbils were there. Yeah, that's right. Come
Shit.
on. Damn, the dot just closed. Exactly.
When I tell people that I'm an atheist, one of the most common responses is, "But you're such a good person." It may come as a surprise to some that these two things aren't mutually exclusive.
I think that the atheistic worldview fails to supply a reasoned and adequate foundation for why morals are what they are.
Whatever God commands is right. God is the essence of right. We don't hold God to some moral standard apart from himself. He doesn't have to uphold some standard that we like or don't like.
How horribly widespread is the myth that you somehow need religion to get your morals. I mean, if you just think for a moment about that, it's obvious nonsense. You don't get your morals from religion. Well, you better not get them from, you certainly better not get them from the Bible. Heaven forbid you get them from the Bible, or the Quran, even worse.
You want to see true ethnic cleansing, forget about Bosnia. You know, take a good hard look at the Old Testament.
If you were in Joshua's position, or Saul's, or Abraham, would you follow those orders and kill your own child, or kill women and children?
Well, thank God I'm not in that context. If I were, if I were part of ancient Israel, I have to obey God.
In a word, yes, they were. They were doing what God ordained or what God told them to do.
Now, would you obey such an order if you were in their place?
If God told me, yes.
You would?
Yes. It's like God is completely love. God is full of grace, but God is also just.
I mean, God is love, right? I'm going to read a book that was written by God. I'm going to come away with great wisdom, great knowledge. And what I got instead was primitive, savage bigotry, misogyny, racism, superstition of the basest possible kind. These were not the words of a superior being, much less a supreme being. These were inferior. And I honestly don't think I made it out of Genesis before I threw the Bible across the room in disgust.
I'm a humanist. I intend to leave this world a better place when I die. And when I die, I'm dead. I'm not counting on a bailout at the end. And I say there's a lot of people who profess all kinds of faith that are willing to run swords through each other, blow people's heads off, and I recognize them by their fruits.
And so you think that you can tell us how to live our lives, never questioning the source from which our moral code derives.
For the length of time that I've been in the atheist movement, I can say beyond the shadow of a doubt that the atheists that I'm now in relationships with are actually more moral and more ethical than any of the Christians that I ever had any relationships with. And the reason for that is because the atheist has to take complete and total responsibility for their actions.
I think it's quite likely that the person who believes in God is less moral than an atheist. At the sense of God redeems us, He calls us whoever we are, wherever we are, and says, and God says, you don't have to be moral to be one of my people. He gives us that relationship with Him as a gift.
The flawed values are from our friends over here who preach eternal torture, inequality, and hatred. Compare and contrast.
For example, George Whitefield was one of the founders of Methodism, which is actually a relatively liberal branch of Christianity. Yet he was one of the key people in getting slavery re-legalized in the state of Georgia, at that time the colony. Slavery was actually abolished, and he came in, had a huge plantation, wanted slaves to work on it, and worked really hard telling the people about how the Bible said that slavery is okay.
So you'd say that homosexuality is worse than slavery?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, I do. Mm-hmm.
And why is that?
Well, number one, the Bible strictly prohibits it, where it doesn't strictly prohibit slavery. There you go.
You would have thought that the Vatican could have said, okay, while we're dumping these Gospels, we don't want them in, why don't we take all the slavery bits out? That would be a good idea.
Thomas Jefferson said, yeah, there are some good teachings in the Bible, but it's like, and these are his words, it's like digging through a dunghill to find a diamond. And he found some diamonds, and I think a lot of Christians, they just pick out the diamonds from the Bible, which are there, and then they say that's the Christian scheme, when really those diamonds are human values.
Religion cloaks itself in a mantle of authority, as Hitchens says, of sort of totalitarian authority, and then it can override our basic moral instincts.
Sounds like you're a good person, and you don't want to.
I don't want to
say that you would kill your son or kill
yes.
women or children.
It's a very good question, my friend. It's a very good. It's a hard question, yes.
And it's not.
In this day and age, it would be very difficult to follow through. But let's put it this way: I would probably move forward, but I'd be hoping that God would stop me.
These are people who depart from their innate moral sense and from the universal moral sense of a 20th or 21st century person, because they find that in their Bible it says something, and then they say, yes, if God ordered me to kill my son, I would do so.
It's all poison. The worldview is and the outlook. We can't deny it all you want, but the truth is it's all poison. That religion you've been given is wicked.
You'd be hard pressed to find someone who, used violence in the name of atheism. Ever, really. I mean, if you think about it, who's done that? Who's killed a bunch of people and said, I did it because there's no God? It's always God told me to do it.
Maybe you've noticed, but we're at war. On one side of this war we have fanatical members of a death cult who believe that dying is a rite of passage into paradise. And on the other side, we have fanatical members of a death cult who believe dying is a rite of passage into paradise.
Well, I feel that, murdering and raping and stealing is wrong, and you don't need a big brother or someone in the sky telling you that. You can just see it for yourself. And I feel that if the only reason that you don't murder and kill people is God told you not to, that makes you a bad person.
Do you think that you would be a less moral person if you didn't believe in God?
I have no doubt about it. Yeah, I have absolutely no doubt about it.
What things do you think you would do that it's constrained you from doing?
I don't even want to open that lid in my mind because
people get confused because his history has given religion weight and gravitas and buildings and music, and that's fine. That's the history of humankind, but don't get confused. Beautiful buildings and nice robes and music and art are all wonderful outcomes of humankind, and humankind has always been religious, but their ideas are those of infants. They are wrong. And, as it turns out, don't.
My family never taught us, my brother and I were never taught the traditional stories of the Bible. So we never had any kind of understanding of what most kids get brought up in Christian society, at least, you know, the story of Jesus and all that stuff. And yet, my parents are, you know, they're wonderful people who are have outstanding ethics and great moral values, and that's what got passed along to us. So it was always sort of like, I always took a lot of offense when I heard people talk about this Christian society we lived in, or, you know, the other thing that bugs me a lot are when people talk about Christian values, you know, as if there's something different about their values than someone who's not Christian.
My morality is not set into stone tablets who don't even tell you not to hurt children. My morality is not dictated by a deity, it's developed from empathy, dependence, and love.
I remember way back in Catholic grade school wondering what I'd believe if I'd been born in India, or Tibet, or Saudi Arabia. Was my faith in Jesus merely an accident to the geography of my birth?
I'm very blessed that I was brought up in a Christian home, because it makes it easier to believe, I would say. Yeah, I do believe that, because it would be very difficult for me to move to India and believe in their religions, or move to, I mean, anywhere that believes something differently.
Religion is a configuration of ideas. I mean, you are a Catholic because you accept a whole configuration of ideas. And I was interested in how do those ideas get from me to you? And it looks a hell of a lot like you sneezing on me, and I get a call from you. Well, when the Jehovah's Witnesses come to knock on your door, they're sneezing on you. Or the Mormons, they're sneezing on you. Your Baptist neighbor gives you a pamphlet, they're sneezing on you. They're trying to get you to catch their God virus. And then when you catch the God virus, it kind of takes over your mind, and you want to give it to somebody else.
We do know that 86% of those who receive Christ as Savior do so between the ages of 4 and 14. And statistically, the older a person gets, the less likely they are to make a decision for Christ.
They know that as a child you are not naturally inclined to a particular religion. You have to be shaped. Children are plastic, let's mold them.
They're more pliable then. They haven't really set in their ways.
It's very simple. Even a child can believe. And all you need to do is believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. So I think it's just very, very simple. I think that sometimes, though, that what gets in the way is our life or our lifestyle.
When I left on my 18th birthday, I was pretty much convinced that what I had grown up learning was true and that I was going to go to hell.
Well, that's the reason I got this sign, is because that's sort of what bothers me the most. It's just the idea that they're using fear to manipulate kids.
He looked at me and he goes, you know, if you keep an open mind, you leave it susceptible to demonic influence. I was like, wow, and to a 12-year-old, that's very powerful. That's, you know, I don't want Satan, because Satan was this guy with horns and this, that, the other thing, and I didn't want the devil to be in my head. I mean, this is what, it's, you look at it now in retrospect, you realize it's a form of child abuse.
When I see people that are dying and go to hell, it just makes me so sad.
So you really care about them, that's why you're trying to save them.
Have you ever been burned?
Yeah.
Burning hurts bad. To burn forever in hell, it's terrible.
And you are worshiping something else.
So do you think that the people here who are atheists say that they're going to burn in hell?
God, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. You can't be a Muslim or a Hindu or anything else and get to heaven, because Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Because unless you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved.
Smile, there is no hell.
One of the last ones to fall was this deep-seated concern that In the end, I was going to die and be tortured. And that was a profound relief when I finally let go of that.
When you think about Pascal's wager, it just boils down to an argument from intimidation. Because what if I'm wrong, I'm going to hurt. What if I'm wrong, I'm going to burn.
I think of the young people who've paid the price for leaving that place, cut off completely and permanently for all they've known and loved. I know the years of fear and anguish they will face as they struggle with the messages hardwired in their brain. The messages that constantly threaten their resolve to be freed of the shackles of hatred and judgment. The certainty that overwhelms them at times that they will suffer an eternity of torture for their decisions.
If you'll notice, once a person's been infected by about age 6 to 10, once they're infected, they rarely get infected with anything else.
As Ernestine Rose said, all children are born atheists and they would remain so unless they were otherwise inculcated.
My son at the age of 10 literally cried for almost 24 hours because when we were both dead, I would not be in heaven with him. And I knew that I had let this go too far. I had assumed that since I'd left religion at 12, 13, that my kids surely would see through it, but I think I completely and wildly underestimated the power of the system of indoctrination.
Once the God virus, no matter what you call it, Catholicism, Islam, Mormonism, once it gets in somebody's head, it really doesn't give a damn about you. All it wants to do is get to another person. Now, that other person could be your children, grandchildren, or your next door neighbor. It wants to go from your brain to somebody else's brain, just like the Toxoplasma gondii wants to get from one rat's brain to a cat's gut and then into another rat's brain. The organism is only using you as what we call a vector. And a mosquito that passes on malaria is just a vector for the malaria plasmodium. And so we see this, and religions are just parasites, and they act like parasites. And once you realize that metaphor, it just makes so much sense.
There is no doubt that religious faith can drastically change the focus of one's life. And this is no more clearly apparent than in the belief of end times and judgment day, as I witnessed for myself firsthand.
And I was a part-time police officer, and so I gave up both of those jobs.
Don't forget private investigator.
Well, in between that, yes, and I had my own business as a PI, private investigator, licensed by the state of New York.
And so you quit those jobs?
Yes, I did. I gave up my business, and I resigned from both of my jobs.
Once you find from Scripture that God has given you a date, your whole life changes overnight. That's your focus 24/7. You can't get your mind off of that. That's all you think about.
We were like that. We thought it could be tonight. And that's a powerful evangelical tool to go up to somebody and say, you know, Jesus might return tonight. And if he does, will you be ready?
You don't want to wait to see that it's going to happen and then do something, because then it's for sure going to be too late.
So I traveled the last 3 days of the world with the May 21st group, Harold Campion's group.
Oh, yes.
So I traveled in their motorhomes with them for the last 3 days of the world and filmed them, proselytizing and converting things. I came away from it extremely sad and depressed because so many of these people had quit their jobs. They'd spent all their money in this effort knowing that this next day would be their last day.
I find it very hard to rustle up any sympathy for them, I must say. But
that's how I felt at first. Yes. And then when I met them, though, they had brought their children.
That does make me sad.
It was very sad, you know.
That does make me sad.
This teaches you about God and the rapture. When God comes, the people who are saved, they're going to go to heaven. And the people who aren't raptured, they're going to stay here and suffer the 5 months of judgment. People who aren't believers, they'll be able to believe, but those who don't, then, you know, it's heaven or hell.
Are you ready to rapture? The Savior has returned. He loves you forever, but the unbelievers must burn.
Religious people are, in a sense, victims. They're victims of brainwashing. They believe something that they would not normally believe. It doesn't make them stupid, but it does make them victimized by the machine that brought them into this.
Seeing my family out there protesting, standing behind barriers with their garish signs, espousing the ideology of their God, the prevailing emotion for me is sadness. I see the results of a lifetime of controlled indoctrination. I see a system that vilifies new ideas, shuns new discoveries, clinging rather to ancient notions about the nature of our world.
It is commonly stated that one should respect someone's religious beliefs. But should we respect the oppression of women, of gays, or the rejection of science merely because it is a religious doctrine?
We're going to celebrate our belief in reason, science, and the power of the human mind. We are not here to bash anyone's particular faith. We are not here to mock anyone's particular beliefs. If it happens, but that's not why.
My other proof of God, that there is no God, is that God should have flicked Hitler's head off. Surely, if there is a God, he should have just flicked Hitler's head off. What is he waiting for? There were some clues there. And it would be so easy for God, using the long arm, just like Monty Python, just come down and just flick Hitler's head off right at a big bit. And another thing. And all the Nazis. Nazis. Hans, his head's come off. Hitler's head's come off. Hey guys, I think Hitler's head's come off. And if people say God's not supposed to get involved, then what the fuck are we going into the buildings for and doing all the mumbling on Sundays?
Do you really believe that when a priest blesses a wafer, it turns into the body of Christ? Are you seriously telling me you believe that? Are you seriously saying that wine turns into blood? Mock them, ridicule them. In public. Don't fall for the convention that we're all too polite to talk about religion. Religion is not off the table. Religion is not off limits. Religion makes specific claims about the universe which need to be substantiated and need to be challenged and, if necessary, need to be ridiculed with contempt.
I mean, I do get a lot of hate mail, but it's nothing as extreme as when I do a video on Islam. That's when things get interesting.
The Prophet Muhammad and his wives, there are certain things that are off limits for ridicule.
I said, the Prophet was not a man of good character. Rather, he was a liar, charlatan, sexist, rapist, pedophile, and a killer.
There were some death threats, which was fun. But I'm not scared. I don't really care. I think that when people make death threats, they don't actually want to hurt you. I mean, if you want to hurt somebody, you don't warn them in advance. So I think it's a scare tactic to shut us up.
We've had the windows shot out of our house twice. We've had innocent animals slaughtered and put on the front porch. Swastikas and crucifixes painted on the house, tires slashed, beer bottles, feces thrown at the house. That's just in Albuquerque where we live.
It is hiding behind the label of freedom of speech when it's actually intended and its design is to do something totally different. It's actually hate speech.
If they don't accept Jesus as their Savior, and what I believe is, yes, they are in fact going to hell.
Saying that I'm going to burn in a fire eternally is so much worse than me saying, well, I don't believe the same things you do. In fact, I find your beliefs a little bit silly, but I am the jerk, not the person who says I'm going to hell.
You are deliberately doing something to inflame the passions of these folk.
Do you think that should be illegal too?
Yeah.
My dear friend Cristina Rad mentioned yesterday that beliefs should not be respected simply because people hold them.
The truth is, we are allowed to criticize all religions, but not Islam. It is an accepted idea that there should be a limit to freedom of expression.
This is where the state should come in.
Not so much the actual words themselves, it's knowing the reaction that
right, the reaction that you're going to cause. I mean, for 1 second, do you think that it would be tolerated for people to make those kinds of statements about
other faith communities or the prophets of other faith communities, if they knew that this would create a certain ripple effect, it just wouldn't happen.
But you yourself have said you don't believe that Jesus actually rose from the dead.
Right.
Now, if there are Christians out there who would start killing and rioting because you said that, would that mean that you shouldn't say such a thing?
It's totally different.
Fuck the motherfucking Pope. Fuck the motherfucker and fuck you, motherfucker, if you think that motherfucker is sacred. If you cover for another motherfucker who's a kitty fucker, fuck you, you're no better than the motherfucking rapist. And if you don't like the swearing this motherfucker forced from me and reckon it shows moral or intellectual paucity, then fuck you, motherfucker. This is language one employs, but one is a little bit cross at motherfuckers fucking boys. Yep.
Faith is the enemy of reason. The one thing every single one of us here must be united in despising is faith.
We're trying to get a debate between the presidential candidates on science and technology issues, the issues that will govern our future: energy, national security, healthcare. Last time when we tried to make this happen in Philadelphia, the candidates the day before decided instead that they would have a debate on faith. Faith doesn't matter. Faith isn't going to affect our future.
And he said, I've always wanted to ask you, because you do a lot of material about God and stuff, but you've never answered for me the fundamental question of why. Why you don't believe in God. And I said, well, Sam, I don't believe in God for the same reason that anyone who doesn't believe in a thing doesn't believe in it, because I haven't yet been offered enough evidence to allay my doubts. And he said, but you don't just go through your whole life only believing things that you got evidence for, do you? And I said, yep.
The product they're selling in the fundamentalist world, the seductive simplicity of certainty. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's seductive when you say, here's the certain answer. And it's a simple answer. And I am absolute about it. It is the rejection of information. That's the point.
Now, do you ever have doubts yourself about Jesus or about God? Are you 100%? Are you 50%? Or are you...
That's a good question. I know that I know that I know. I'm 150% sure. There is no doubt.
100%. I'm absolutely 100% without a doubt. I'm 100%.
I would say 150%.
Now, do you ever have any doubts?
No.
Are you like 100% certain?
Absolutely, 100%, 300%, as many 100% as you can be.
And he said, aha! You don't have any evidence for love? And I said, oh, well, yeah, sure. Love without evidence is stalking. Sam.
There's a lot of evidence that you can see, just miracles and stuff that God's working out.
For a study abroad, I went to South Africa and we volunteered at an AIDS orphanage. And that really solidified it. I was like, there can't be a God who gives a shit about kids in Africa. Seeing this suffering, why does God love America so much and just hate everywhere where brown people live?
Well, thank God. I just want to thank God for saving my kid. I'm just so blessed that God was, so busy killing other people's kids that he forgot to kill my kid.
Thousands and thousands of years of religion and no cures, no help, no aid, no improvement. Science comes along, fixes things. I find that fact of reality far more persuasive than any promise from any priest.
I still have all the same problems I had when I was trusting God to be my provider and my helper. Except now I'm no longer having to live with the overwhelming scourge of feeling like I've been betrayed by the omnipotent lover of the universe who could have helped.
So for a bit of a change from his usual stunt of being a sexist, racist, murderous, he popped down to Dandenong and just like that used his powers to heal the cataracts of Sam's mom, of Sam's mom. Oh, thank you, God, for fixing the cataracts of Sam's mom. I didn't realize that it was such a simple thing. I feel such a ding-a-ling, what ignorant scum. Now I understand how prayer can work. A particular prayer in a particular church, in a particular style, with a particular stuff, and for particular problems that are particularly tough, and for particular people, preferably white, and for particular senses, preferably sight. A particular prayer in a particular spot, to a particular version of a particular God. And if you get that right, he just might take a break from giving babies malaria and pop down to your local area to fix the cataracts of your mom.
The mystery of our origins has been one of the most profound questions asked since the dawn of human self-awareness, which is probably why it is still one of the most contentious issues even today.
It is a thing most wonderful that on this once barren rock, orbiting a rather mediocre star on the edge of a rather ordinary galaxy, on this rock, a remarkable process called evolution by natural selection has given rise to the magnificent diversity of complexity of life, the elegance, the beauty, and the illusion of design which we see all around us, has given rise in the last million years or so to a species, our species, with a brain big enough to comprehend that process, to comprehend how we came to be here. That's not just true, it's beautiful.
Millions of law enforcement authorities, social services, science teachers, medical practitioners, and politicians actually believe, ladies and gentlemen, despite overwhelming contrary evidence, that our Earth is only 6,000 years old.
Religious people do tend to say, well, you know, science is just full of theories. Well, religion is just full of stories. They're not even theories. It's one level below. It's just what somebody said.
I was the kid in school, in Sunday school, who would go, that doesn't make any sense. And then I'd get in trouble because I'd say, like, wait, really? Really? All of the animals on one boat? Really? Like that kind of stuff. And now, you know, like what this one, like, okay, wait, so there's Adam and Eve and two guys. Where does everybody come from?
So you think that teaching evolution in school is teaching atheism?
It is. It certainly is. That's what you're promoting.
I looked through the tags about evolution because I wanted to learn more, and finally I found something, how life could exist without God. And I was just kind of like, what? And it was a really life-changing thing for me.
Like my dad just said, we were not apes, and apes did not turn into people. It's crazy.
Charles Darwin wrote his most famous book called, of course, Monkey, 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 You. This caused outrage in the monkey community. Monkeys were furious. They put Charlton Heston on trial in the famous monkey trial.
Humanity apparently is supposed to have a soul. Then at what point in the evolutionary process did the soul get inserted? If we, as evolution teaches us, since species emerge only incrementally, that means there was no point when there was the first human being. There was no magic first human being because everything is so incremental. It means there was no Adam. And if there was no Adam, there was no original sin, there was no fall from a state of paradise, then, I hate to say it, but Jesus died for nothing. There was nothing to redeem. And that is precisely why fundamentalist evangelical Christians are so threatened by evolution, because I think they understand the implications.
If some of the Bible isn't true, then you can't believe any of the Bibles. Because if something contains a little bit of lie, then you can't believe any of it.
I was actually a counselor for Youth for Christ in Kansas City, and we had an atheist who came in there, and he was arguing with everybody. The first round of counselors couldn't do anything with him, so they passed us up to the second bunch, which I was part of. We knew a little bit more. He argued us down. We couldn't do anything. We passed him up to our bosses. They passed him up to the head of the ministry, Al Metzger. Argued for a half hour, and Al Metzger jumped up finally and said, "So what if the first 5 books of the Bible are not true? Doesn't mean the whole damn book is a lie." And it just opened the door for me right there. I didn't know what to do at that point, and I started investigating. I became an atheist real quick after that.
We had 300 atheists going through the Creation Museum, led by this famous atheist blogger, biologist, P.Z. Myers, and we noticed that the signs had no qualms about this dichotomy. They said, this is what human reason tells us, this is what the Bible tells us. If they're in conflict, go with the Bible, reject human reason.
You go to the Creation Museum, beautifully produced, really well done, lying to kids.
Representative Shimkus says that God promised the world won't end in a flood, and so he's not worried about global warming. We just had Senator Inhofe saying that because of his interpretation of the Bible, he thinks that global warming is a myth and that we don't need to worry about it. These are some of our elected representatives, some of the most powerful people in the country, and they're not paying attention to what our observations tell us. They're not paying attention to what science is informing us, and that's dangerous. I don't know any other way to put it.
As long as we keep believing in demons, devils, and goblins, we'll never see a reason to tackle problems and solve them. Cause we gon' keep on thinking it's part of divine prophecy, and we don't have to solve it, cause one day Jesus will stop and see. Many of y'all invested in living life after death, and nobody's ever proved that we even have a soul yet. So why everybody speculate, lots of y'all hesitate, praying with your fingers crossed and hoping there's a heaven waiting. So Sky Daddy's only talking to your group, huh? And everything in your holy book is the truth, huh? And we gonna burn if we don't listen to you, huh? Well, every other group is claiming that too, bruh. So don't be coming at me unless you got some evidence.
I can't imagine that they're that ignorant that they actually believe all this crap.
I don't believe it. The rapture and all that. Maybe George Bush, he's that ignorant.
Oh yeah, well no, with George I make an exception. I'm sure he believed everything.
When the Christian flag controversy erupted around me in King, North Carolina, I was astounded to hear so many citizens and elected officials alike denounce the idea of separation of church and state.
It looks to me as though the country is kind of splitting into two. I mean, that you've got the sort of benighted, ignorant, prejudiced sort of Tea Party wing, and then on the other hand you've got the educated side of America, which is the most educated, civilized country in the world, if only it wasn't for the other half.
Most of these atheists don't like God. They want a separation of church and state.
I don't think it is a good concept because that's what this is what America was grounded on. That's what our forefathers believed in, was God.
In the eyes of our designing foundational document, Christianity has no special legal significance. I know that upsets Christians. My answer to them is get over it.
The American Constitution is a precious treasure, the envy of the world. The First Amendment to the Constitution, which enshrines the separation between church and state, is the model for secular constitutions the world over and deserves to be imitated the world over.
I have come from a country where it is legal to punish people for saying God does not exist.
It was the Baptists in Rhode Island, Roger Williams, who had the first synagogue, because Baptists believe in separation of church and state, because it was the church and the state that killed millions of people over in Europe.
And so if you want your citizens to have it easy, make it easy for them to do what is consistent with the laws of Islam, then it's the state's responsibility.
I was censored, blacklisted, banned, and banished from my homeland because I said, there is no evidence for God's existence, but there are evidences for evolution. And the universe is neither 6,000 years old, nor was it created in 6 days. I also said, Islam is not compatible with human rights, women's rights, secularism, and freedom of expression.
So would you be in favor of bringing back the anti-sodomy laws?
Yes, I would.
So putting people who are homosexual in prison?
Possibly, yeah.
Religious parents all over this country tell their children that they're not good enough, that they need to go to anti-gay camps and be reprogrammed. I hope those kids come back with so many phone numbers. I hope that camp is just a gay screw fest where there is so much gay sex, even the trees are ashamed. They're like, I shouldn't be looking at this. This forest used to be magical.
Of course, the Bible and the Quran and these holy books, they don't actually tell you that you should prevent gay people from getting married. I never saw any scripture say that. What they say is that you should kill them.
No, I don't think we ought to be putting them to death. But sodomy is a vile and disgusting thing. God calls it abomination. That means, put it metaphorically, not literally, but metaphorically, it makes God sick to his stomach.
The current Dalai Lama said that although he supports tolerance for gay people, he sees homosexual sex as wrong, unwholesome, a bad action, and contrary to Buddhist ethics.
In Islam, there is no public allowance for homosexuality.
Now there's a lot of Islamic countries that don't have separation of church and state. They're theocracies. Do you think that this is a universal principle that should be applied to all countries?
I do. Firmly. I'm an American Muslim, and so I very firmly believe in our First Amendment.
From Majid, who says, we wish we could all be there, and we wish for the day non-believers can be themselves here in Iran.
And I would point out that free thought activism, there are exceptions, rarely brings out the violence or the threats of violence, the nastiness. It's working for separation of church and state.
Jessica Alquist found this out firsthand when she was the plaintiff in a lawsuit challenging the Christian banner and prayers at a Rhode Island public high school.
I stood up and said, I am an atheist student, and this prayer directly discriminates against me. And in response to that, I remember somebody gasped and somebody mumbled under their breath that I was a witch. And it was really weird for me because, I mean, I knew the word atheist was not accepted in society, but I didn't realize how much it wasn't.
It was not freedom from religion, it was freedom of religion.
We had a dead fish in the mail once, and we get an awful lot of phone calls, and some of them were death threats.
I had grown men and women telling me that they hope my family loses everything we have and ends up homeless.
But every time we did something big on campus that that people talked about, or something big that we put in the crier, something bad would happen to me. People wrote like "Die Atheist Bitch" on the posters. They would tear down, our posters were never up for more than an hour.
If we would find an Islamic oppressor or Jewish oppressor or an atheist oppressor, we'd go after them with equal vigor and tenacity. But we don't. It's always the same type of enemy. We're fighting the Christian Taliban.
I open the door and a bucket of piss falls on me.
Newt Gingrich suggests that the Ground Zero mosque that's near Ground Zero, not even at Ground Zero, that mosque, they wouldn't permit us to build a church in Saudi Arabia. And for me to hear that, I think, wow, did Newt Gingrich just say he wanted to make America like Saudi Arabia?
And I think that by turning our back on the principles that God has said is wrong, I think that we are at risk of, maybe losing some of His protection.
The idea of a deity shine its light on one nation, one state, one city, one person. Come on, that's irrational.
And she's like, it's actual shit, like feces. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah. She's like, it's smeared all over the counter, it's smeared on the mirror, it's smeared above the lights, they stuck your toothbrush in it, they covered your toiletry items with it. It's everywhere.
I think what the students in this movement are doing is amazing. And I think it's what brings people together in the biggest way.
When I moved to South Carolina, I found out that our state constitution prohibited atheists from holding public office. And I went to the ACLU to see how this obviously unconstitutional provision could be changed, and I found out there was a lot of pushback from the leadership in South Carolina. They took that very seriously. So I first ran for governor, and the judge there said he would rule on the merits of the case if I won the election, which of course I lost. I found out I couldn't even be a notary public in South Carolina because I couldn't hold any public office. So I took 7 years of litigation, and South Carolina spent close to $100,000 trying to keep me from becoming a notary public.
People deny that there are atheists in foxholes. The accusations are that either we don't have the conviction of our beliefs, or that we don't participate in the defense of our nation. Both accusations are, of course, false.
Jessica, with the help of thousands of donors, it is our honor to present you with this check for $62,618 for college. I just want to point out that the memo line says bravery.
Faith without evidence is not limited to traditional forms of religion, of course.
I think human beings are God-making creatures. I think any place from the Polynesian Islands to the Eskimos to the Amazon, you'll find people making gods. Usually out of what's at hand.
Now, philosophically, I'm both an atheist and a skeptic, but just who and what are we skeptics? Skepticism means having good reasons for holding any belief. We're cautious about drawing conclusions, but always willing to change our minds upon the presentation of new or better information.
Storm suddenly insists, but the human body is a mystery. Science just falls in a hole when it tries to explain the nature of the soul.
I can think about a conversation in the past with somebody. They don't have to be present. I don't have to have them present to have a complex interaction with them. So you can see it's very easy. It's just one step to having a conversation with a dead ancestor. It's just one step to having a conversation with a God.
Spirit talks to me in my heart all the time, but it's much easier if you're going to sit for half an hour or an hour to have something for that person to focus on, and then, you know, be able to pull from there, because Spirit gives just as much of the message as the cards do.
How does science explain psychics, auras, the afterlife, the power of prayer?
So what we did is we had a tape of a guy speaking in tongues. And so we played it for him. And then he said, oh, this is what he's saying, blah, 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 blah. And we say, great. And a year later, we bring him back that same tape. And he goes, oh, he's saying something totally different. So I was like, I think this is bullshit right here. It's just, you know, it's like with people who think they have psychic powers. It's that drama for their mind, and they're acting it out.
I will tell you that some of my information comes from channeled writing from purported ET sources, and that even the ETs are not sure what's going to happen. They have thoughts about what's going to happen, but they don't yet really know themselves.
I would do tarot card readings for myself and for other people that would seem just really spooky, that would just seem, it's impossible that I could have known that about, you know, if I'm doing a reading for somebody else about their love life or about their career, and I'll do this reading, they go, I don't understand how you couldn't possibly know that.
It's just like really curious.
Okay.
So let me know what that is when it happens.
Jesus understood electron spin. Now this was interesting to me because the ability to understand the molecular, the atomic structure, and to interact with it in a different way to facilitate healing or to walk on water, you know, so that takes spirit and quantum.
I absolutely believe there are things we don't understand about quantum physics or the relationship between particles and, you know, how space-time works. That's what I think is the unanswered mysteries. I don't think those are answered by people coming back from the dead or having telekinesis.
It's really easy with these sorts of methods to remember the hits, to remember the time that that it told you should stay single right now and that was really the right decision, and you forget about the times that it told you should really stay in this relationship and that was a terrible decision.
Oh, okay, what does that card mean?
Well, it's got like, I want to say,
Be honest.
I just want to say, like, I want to ask you if you're pregnant.
Not that I know of.
When really careful studies are done of these divination methods in astrology and so on, when they're really carefully scrutinized under scientific methods that are designed to filter out these human biases, they're clearly shown to not have any effectiveness at all.
It was pretty amazing to see that level of shamanic healing where one person at a time went up, and it was incredible because she could see possession, she could see all these different, whatever we want to talk about possession and all the different things that could mean, but she would, slap people, take their arm and suck things out of them and spit things into a bucket.
What kind of things that would come up?
Like pellets, metal pellets and mucus, and I mean, it was amazing. And the skin wouldn't be broken. Like a giant bruise would form immediately, but she would literally be spitting things out of her mouth, and that was really quite fascinating.
I can tell you story after story after story. I can tell you about, like 80-year-old folk healers looking at you as a complete stranger and reading off your entire life story to you.
We offer $1 million to any person or persons who can provide evidence of any paranormal, occult, or supernatural event or power of any kind under proper observing conditions. We ask that they make application formally by signing a document which is on our webpage, and they send it in after being notarized, and then we talk about terms for what the protocol will be.
Right, no, I don't think these things are fake. I mean, I do believe that there are people out there being fake and doing it, but I don't believe John of God or is fake, or the shaman I saw, and
How do you know which ones are fake and which ones are real?
How do I know?
How does anyone know?
Wow.
The results are very obvious. You don't have to judge them or vote on them or anything like that. You either did it or you didn't do it. In every case, people who have done these preliminary tests have failed to do it. Now, that doesn't show that these powers don't exist. It just shows that on this particular occasion, at this time and place, it didn't work.
Well, most lies eventually are revealed. Someone who isn't in integrity can't keep the illusion going forever,
Look, Storm, sorry, I don't mean to bore you, but there's no such thing as an aura. Reading auras is like reading minds or tea leaves or star signs or meridian lines. These people aren't plying a skill. They're either lying or mentally ill. Same goes for people who claim they can hear God's demands and spiritual healers who think they got magic hands. By the way, why do we think it's okay for people to pretend to talk to the dead? Isn't that totally fucked in the head? Lying to some crying woman whose child has died and telling her you're in touch with the other side? I think that is fundamentally sick. Do we need to clarify here that there's no such thing as a psychic? What are we, fucking two? Do we actually think that Horton heard a who? Do we still believe that Santa brings us gifts?
I know a lot of mothers now who didn't go to college and read a blog that said vaccinations are evil, and so they're not going to get their kids a dirty vaccination. And it sucks because I think people think they're being rational and they're being skeptical, but they're really not.
The first thing you think is like, I need a doctor. And so you rush to the doctor and you start with your doctor's visits, and the more doctors you see, the more doctors you think you need.
Why take drugs when herbs can solve it? Why use chemicals when homeopathic solvents can resolve it? I think it's time we all return to live with natural medical alternatives.
So if Chinese medicine or homeopathy or acupuncture or anything like that can demonstrate its effectiveness in a double-blind trial, then we have to take it seriously. But it's one thing to say that Chinese medicine or any of these other alternative medicines have a different principles underlying them. They are not allowed to get away with having different principles for testing.
Do you know what they call alternative medicine that has been proved to work? Medicine.
The Roman poet Lucretius said, "Fear was the mother of the gods. Fear above all of death." You might think that without a hope for an afterlife, atheists see no point in living, but you would be wrong.
I am an amazing amalgamation of milliseconds, a compilation of coincidences, a collection of infinitely small spans of time that separates me from the possibility of my bloodline. I have managed to outrun 500 million of my brothers and sisters to be here today, continuing a chain of happenstance that began moments after the Big Bang brought the universe into being. Matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed, so the same molecules that make up me in this instance have been in existence for over 13 billion years. We are heavenly, but there is no godly hand evident in the creation of man. I can instead trace evidence of my being into the cosmos. The same elements that make me unique have been sourced to create the universe. I mean, forget Jesus. Stars died. Galaxies gave their lives to form my fingertips. How could I not find wonder in waking up? Be more amazed at each day that I open my eyes. Each day I'm granted more time on this little blue marble floating through the vast emptiness of space. I am in awe of life.
I feel like when you're sort of looking for this like fictional afterlife, you kind of drop the ball in your real life, and it's like you can make a situation similar to heaven here.
That idea that people who are born into poverty, who are born into misery, who are born into illness, who are born into being crippled or something like that, that it's their fault, that they did something in a bad in a past life and they're being punished for it, that's unconscionable. I cannot accept that. I mean, for one thing, it serves as a justification for why we don't have to do anything about it, or for why we don't have to help these people, because, well, it's just their fault.
If somebody is born crippled, we would say, oh, it's just genetic, or it's just an accident or something.
No, it's their karma.
And they hold on to their religion with the best might that they can, and of course they give them all their money, because it's real, because that's the only way they don't have to die.
I highly recommend cryonics for everyone and everyone's pets. My 2 dogs, Muffin and Cupcake, are already signed up.
Well, in your idea with reincarnation, where does that come from? Is that something that you would like to believe, or have you seen any sort of evidence for that, or how is that different from somebody's belief in heaven or hell?
I have no hard evidence on that. It just, I just resonate with it. It makes sense to me.
We're not worried about where we were before we were born. I don't know. I think that's probably where we're going to go after our physical existence ceases. Does that mean that it's paradise and there are virgins or there are parties and angels and harps? What?
I think it's pretty clear, actually, many of them don't really believe it. I mean, that's clear to me from the fact that when they're given a death sentence, say by a doctor, they don't jump up in the air and clapping their hands and say, oh, goody.
There was that recent survey that showed that Christians, the more devout your belief, the more likely you were to go for extreme life-saving measures at the end of life. Right. Yeah, they're the ones trying the hardest to avoid. Maybe it's because they know they're all going to hell. That could be it.
Maybe I have an empathetic idea that they have the answers because they're just afraid. And the answer makes sense to their fear. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm not afraid of an afterlife.
They are ruled by fear. That's not my style, and it's not yours either.
I was ordered to take this mandatory spiritual fitness test. I failed the spiritual part, and it said to me, spiritual fitness is an area of possible difficulty for you. You may lack a sense of meaning and purpose in your life. And then it goes to 1-800-342-9647 to speak with someone immediately. So I called this 1-800 number. You need to help me improve my spiritual fitness immediately. I have a red bar. That's the lowest it goes. And she said, well, we don't really do that. This is a suicide hotline.
My name is William Francis, and I don't think that I have a religious belief anymore.
So you used to, huh?
I used to, yeah. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian home.
I feel like I wouldn't be able to go through life the way I do. I'd probably be depressed, cutting my wrists somewhere if I didn't have something to believe in, that something up there loves me.
Quite honestly, I think there is other forms of hope out there besides false hope.
They took us to church all weekend, which was such a bummer.
What if they didn't have religion? What might their life have been like?
So now what do you use your weekends for?
Well, I write, and I travel, and I play rock music, and I live in the real world.
Atheism is merely a non-belief in a God. But what is it that most atheists do believe in?
We believe there is no rational basis to discriminate on the basis of race or gender. We believe our sex lives are our business, not the government's. We believe life has the meaning we give it through increasing happiness and decreasing suffering in the world. We believe healthcare is our decision and our doctors, not the bishops. We value teaching how to think, not what to think. We value science over the supernatural as an explanation for the world around us.
Life is full of mystery, yeah, but there are answers out there and they won't be found by people sitting around looking serious and saying, isn't life mysterious? Let's sit here and hope. Let's call up the fucking Pope. Let's go watch Oprah interview Deepak Chopra.
It's okay not to know. In fact, not knowing is what drives science.
I am full of this sense that it's ridiculous that we need to be saying this, that it's laughable that we need to be saying, you know, that magic's not real, right?
To be honest, yes. I have worried that Jesus would end up being this fictional creature that they lied to me about all my life.
Unlike some, I never had any negative experiences that turned me away from the church. It was only later that I learned how close my family had come to tragedy at the hands of church dogma.
My mother only told me this story a couple years ago, I think because she had a little bit of wine, which she never usually drinks, at a wedding, my sister's wedding. And I had never heard this story, never heard her say anything negative against the Catholic Church, my father either. And when she had my youngest brother, who was, there's 4 of us, the priest had been called because she had had a rupture when she was giving birth and they thought she was going to die, and so the priest was called to give last rites. She ended up not dying. And the doctor, though, who was Jewish, told her that she had to have her tubes tied, that if she ever got pregnant again, halfway through it would absolutely rupture again and she would definitely die, and then so would the child. And so he left, and she asked the priest, and the priest said, "You've just seen a miracle. You were supposed to die and God saved you. You cannot do that. It's against the church, and if God wants there to be a miracle and you to give birth again, he will heal you. If he doesn't want you to get pregnant, you have to leave it in his hands." And so she said, okay, I guess that's what we have to do. The priest left, and then my father my mom said she'd never seen my father get so angry or had never say anything against the priest. He said, "That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. You are having your tubes tied. We're not going to have a family. What is this priest thinking of, leaving a family of 4 children with no mother?" And so she did, and she never had pregnant again. But it made me realize, had my father not been there, had they both been as trusting as my mother, I probably would have grown up without a mother. So.
That's a shocking story. I mean, that is truly evil. That priest is evil, not as an individual. He's indoctrinated by an evil doctrine. The Roman Catholic Church, I think, is the second most evil organization in the world.
Think of how many women over time, and to this day, in benighted countries where there's a lot of this kind of religion, and particularly, I mean, the Catholic stuff in Africa, and the proscriptions against condom use. To me, that is genocidal, you know, and that is one thing that, you know, we can talk about this in interesting terms about the psychology of religion, and we now understand it. But as we speak today, religion is murdering people. It is responsible for people's deaths, and I feel that we should never lose sight of that.
It is dishonest because you are advocating that people should have as many kids as God blesses them with. That things will sort themselves out somehow. But what we see in practice is that things do not sort themselves out. I mean, 50% of Guatemalans live in extreme poverty conditions, and they continue to have a huge amount of kids. Once you've created this situation, then you put a spin on it and say, yeah, there's a lot of poor, but poverty is a gift from God, or some people need to carry a very heavy burden.
Religions oppress women. And every society that's become secular and reduced its religiosity has increased its industrial production and the liberation that women have.
Many Western intellectuals who are enjoying secularism in their own countries are not agreeing to criticize Islamic oppression of women for fear it might hurt the religious sentiments of Muslims.
This is the radical Christians' invisible burqa. And we are here today to tell them, to tell the world, we will not allow radicals to send women back to a position of enslavement.
My role has been divinely defined, and I have no other choice. I may not be a teacher of man, I must cover up my shame. These are the laws of the one who in vain I cannot name. He tells me my place with everlasting grace, and my punishment for wanting to learn is a painful burn.
Rather than looking backward to the ancient books and myths of our species' childhood for answers, most atheists I know are lovers of science and eagerly look forward. But what might the future hold if we don't face reality?
In this century, when we have to face the future with our eyes wide open, we have candidates for president who are now suggesting that their public policy should be based on the fact that the United States is in a battle with Satan.
I think when you see that one of your Supreme Court justices likewise believes in a literal Satan.
How is it necessary to have a rally for reason?
We don't want to have to be here. It's a pity, really, isn't it? 300 years after the Enlightenment, we still have to be here having a fucking rally for the obvious.
Enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-imposed immaturity. The Age of Reason, then, was an age when humanity was born again, not from original sin, but from original ignorance.
Another candidate who has said that in the future Jesus will reign over Jerusalem and Missouri.
The people who are obsessed with the book of Revelation and who see the conflict in Israel as being foretold in the book of Revelation, as necessary to happen before the final return of Jesus, on the one hand, those people would not have the normal deterrence against releasing a horrible apocalypse. They want an apocalypse. On the other hand, we have people in the Islamic world who, for their own reasons, they want to die a martyr's death and go to a martyr's heaven. So the normal deterrent, the normal restraint against unleashing Armageddon doesn't apply.
If you remember 9/11, we were so shocked, and that's my birthday actually. Everybody was so shocked because they saw two monolithic buildings, towers in the sky taken down, people killed left and right? Well, that's going to be small potatoes in comparison to what God's going to do. You know, He's going to take these buildings and He's going to crumble them, and that's going to change everything for everybody. These people that think they can survive it, are you kidding?
Always look on the bright side of life.
Einstein said 60 some odd years ago, after we exploded the first atomic weapon, that everything has changed save the way we think. And unless we change the way we think, and unless we're willing to revere open questioning, discussion, and a public policy based on reality, we can take this wonderful world we have now in many ways and turn something into nothing. And we all have to make sure that doesn't happen.
And how we've been fighting Muslims for 1,000 years. I mean, it seems ridiculous. We're killing each other's children, and we don't even know why.
In 100 years' time, it seems to me inconceivable that anybody could want to have a rally for reason. By that time, we'll either have blown ourselves up, or we'll have become so civilized that we no longer need it.
The future is the next generation, and it's the next generation we want to educate.
The internet is the reason why atheism is growing. Like, let's be honest here.
because there's no way I would have been able to conceptualize even a life without God until I was able to read stuff on the internet.
I don't know any atheists in Romania. Well, this is why I turned to the wonderful world of the internet.
I think going forward, especially among the younger demographics, we're going to see this changing. We're going to see a much more successful effort to elect politicians who make their decisions based on evidence and reason.
Isn't this enough? Just this world? Just this beautiful, complex, wonderfully unfathomable natural world? How does it so fail to hold our attention that we have to diminish it with the invention of cheap man-made myths and monsters?
Science is much more fascinating than magic and God. We just have to convince people of it.
Through critical thinking, somehow get them to identify the fallibility of their thinking. Because it's much more powerful if someone comes to learn something through self-discovery than through indoctrination.
So you're trying to teach them more to think rather than tell them what they should think?
I would say so. In fact, tonight we're going to play a song called Think Before You Die.
Porcelain and alabaster, decaying ever faster, unaware of imminent disaster. Open up your eyes as you ruminate the hopeless sands of time, as you wander out your life lost and resigned, and recreate the ruminations in your mind. Everybody is a bastard, my world is like plaster, crumbling apart from pressure of the blaster. Open for a sign as the momentary pleasures take their turn, and the wistful boy runs out of things to learn. The episodes of yore are never to return. Scare up some hope, you're gonna need it just to go. Do all your decisions, numbers don't lie. When you bite the dust, what's for purpose or for trust, you'll never really live and think before you die. Yeah, think before you die. Think before you die. Deficit and deprivation in the wake of desperation. Rewrite the morals, rectify the nation. Now might be the time as you ruminate the hopeless sands of time. Do you wonder how your life has been defined? You know eternity won't ever change your mind. You know eternity won't ever change your mind. So think before you die. Whoa, think before you die.
Don't ever be lazy enough, defeatist enough, cowardly enough to say, I don't understand it, so it must be a miracle. It must be supernatural. God did it. Say instead that it's a puzzle. It's strange. It's a challenge that we should rise to. Whether we rise to the challenge by questioning the truth of the observation or by expanding our science in new and exciting directions, the proper and brave response to any such challenge is to tackle it head on. And until we found a proper answer to the mystery, it's perfectly okay simply to say, this is something we don't yet understand, but we're working on it. It's the only honest thing to do. Miracles, magic, and myths, they can be fun, and I've had fun with them throughout my book. Everybody likes a good story. Myths are fun as long as you don't confuse them with the truth. The real truth has a magic of its own. The truth is more magical, in the best and most exciting sense of the word, than any myth or made-up mystery or miracle. Science has its own magic, the magic of reality. Thank you very much.
I hope you find some people that agree with leaving that flag down and interview them. I would like to know their thought process. I really would. Because it's for sure they don't think like I do.
Oh, I can't put this on tape. No.
I thought somebody had won this argument by now.
You can't win.
Did you convert him?
No. He won't be converted, neither will I.